Good afternoon. On behalf of Engineers Australia, I'm delighted to welcome you all to Planning for Brisbane's 2032 and Beyond webinar. My name is Amanda and I'll be your host for today. In keeping with our custom, Engineers Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of the countries throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters, skies and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples as the oldest continuous cultures on Earth and our first engineers. We pay our respects to them, their cultures, and to elders past and present. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that today's event is being hosted with Engineers Australia's industry partner, Nearmap. Nearmap is the property intelligence provider customers rely on for consistent, reliable, high-resolution imagery insights and answers to create meaningful change in the world and propel industries forward. Harnessing its own patented camera systems, imagery capture, AI, geospatial tools, and advanced SaaS platforms, Nearmap users receive tailored solutions for complex challenges. Nearmap captures wide-scale urban areas in Australia, New Zealand and the US several times each year, making content instantly available in the cloud via web app or API integration. Founded in Australia in 2007, Nearmap stands as the definitive source of truth that shapes the livable world. I'd now like to welcome Rob Malkin, Vice President, Commercial Sales, Nearmap.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm really pleased to be part of the Nearmap team, an incredible company founded in Western Australia in 2007, with a clear mission to deliver a complete property intelligence solution that helps make work faster, more efficient, and more accurate across the landscape. At Nearmap, we own the full technology stack built right here in Barangaroo, Sydney. This allows us to provide a true end-to-end solution for businesses. To date, we've invested over $1 billion into technology and R&D, and today we support more than 12,000 active customers globally, with more than 8,000 here alone in Australia and New Zealand. We work with a wide range of industries, including government agencies at all levels, commercial organizations, architectural engineering construction firms making Australia and New Zealand who it is, property developers and insurance companies covering us in all of our policies. Because of the value we deliver, we've built strong, trusted relationships with our customers. They rely on our high-end resolution, frequently updated historical imagery going back to when we were founded. And today you'll see exactly how that comes to life. At our core, we're a SaaS company powered by advanced technology. We offer more than 130 different AI layers, and we manage the full process from flying and capturing the imagery to delivering actionable insights based on our captures. Now, focusing on Queensland, why we're here today, what are we doing in this region? Overall, we cover nearly 90% of the population in Queensland with our full suite of solutions. So what can you expect from Nearmap in the year 2026? Well, we're committed to expanding our footprint even more by more than 15% this year alone, to continuing to increase the coverage across Queensland, particularly to support large-scale infrastructure projects all around the 2032 games. We're also upgrading our technology and our cameras in particular, moving from an older system to our new HC3 camera. This will deliver imagery with resolutions as precise as 1.1 to 1.2 centimeters, meaning you're not going to just see sharper visuals, but significantly improved data accuracy. Ultimately, our goal is simple: to help our customers save time, improve their efficiency, be more productive, and give people back time in their lives. Whether you're working with a small team or facing workforce constraints, Nearmap is designed to make your job easier. Our technology gives you the ability to see what you might otherwise miss, providing greater visibility, higher resolution insights, and data you can actually act upon.
I'd now like to welcome our keynote speaker, Timothy Hortz, Executive Director, Games Infrastructure, Queensland Government. Timothy is a senior executive within the Department of State Development, Infrastructure and Planning, and is responsible for leading the department's 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games obligations set out in the 2032 Delivery Plan. This includes supporting the Games Independent Infrastructure Coordination Authority, delivering the $7.1 billion Venues Program, and partnering with the private sector to deliver the Athletes' Villages. A distinguished public sector executive and program leader, Timothy has extensive experience in delivering complex and high-profile major public projects, such as Queen's Wharf, Brisbane, the Hurston Health Precinct Structure Plan, and regional infrastructure planning and policies for South East Queensland. Please welcome Timothy Hortz.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Hortz. It's a delight to be here today. Give me a microphone. I'll talk forever, particularly about the games. But it's also nice to be here with Nearmap sponsoring the event. I saw a couple of my weird, wild, wonderful projects, both current and historical, on there. So it's good to see the recognition. Look, I'm going to talk a bit today about generally the games program, what's going on currently, what's coming up, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into what the department's doing around Victoria Park. And I hope that gives some insights into some of the things that aren't immediately apparent, because there is a lot of excitement, there's a lot of energy around the games. I don't need to sell the opportunities that it's going to bring to Queensland and more broadly Australia, but there are a lot of good things happening in government that, have probably been behind closed doors for the last year because we're in that natural sort of storming phase. But what you'll see this year is a real focus on delivery and getting stuck into the program. Look, the games is a big deal, but it is still only a small portion of the capital pipeline. We have an enormous commitment ahead of us. We've got a health rescue plan now. We have TMR's enormous program as well too. Do we have anyone from TMR in the room? Hands up. Yep. My condolences. You guys have the hardest job in Queensland over the next 7 years. The games program is only currently about 9% of the capital program. So whilst it gets a lot of attention and it's got a very fixed delivery date, it's still only 9%, whereas, the transport program is currently sitting at about 40 billion. But what this does give us an opportunity, and I'll probably end up talking about it a little bit more maybe during the panel discussion, is for the first time in a long time, we have a commitment of a pipeline beyond the forward estimates. So whilst TMR produces Q-Trip every year and we have a good understanding of what might be required from a regional transport and a state transport network, we've now got locked programs that have a 7-year delivery period and then a legacy fit beyond. And we've also started to see government start to move and defer some of the other programs around it because of the nature of the capacity in the program. So we're hoping that between the health program, the transport program, and the games program, you're starting to get that better visibility for industry and for businesses to start programming their work and their workforce needs as well too. There has been a lot happening in the games. So the 2032 delivery plan is coming up on its first year anniversary on the 25th of March. And we've got 6 venues programs now with investment decision and a number of them in market. So we've got the Moreton Bay Indoor Sports Centre, the Logan Indoor Sports Centre, Redland Whitewater Centre, Sunshine Coast Stadium, Sunshine Coast Mountain Bike Park, and Barlow Park as well too, up in Cairns. There's others that we're still working through. Some of these are new projects that came out in the 2032 delivery plan, but we are moving at pace. Our partners at Geeka have gone and procured their delivery partner as well too. So they've added about 90 FTEs to their office since Christmas. So they are hitting the gas hard this year as well too. And that spread of projects really is like a statewide spread. There's a number of significant projects up and down the coastline, including 4 athletes' villages, which is one of the core responsibilities of my division, in Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, and Rockhampton. But we have a number of those new venues, and we have a heap of upgraded venues as well too. Not to mention later in the year when Brisbane 2032, who's the International Olympic Committee's local organising committee, they'll hand out their sports to venues master plan as well too. And that will confirm which sports are going to be in the games. And then you'll start to see more investment going into training venues as well too. So it really is an exciting opportunity. Look, like I said, a number of these are out they've got investment decisions. Some of them have been out to market. current live procurement is for the National Aquatic Centre, and Geek has released sort of an invitation to pre-qualify before they issue their ECI invites as well too. But you would have seen the award of the architects as well too for the new Brisbane Stadium. The Athletes Village program, so we're partnering with the private sector, and that was recognising that a number of these sites were already well advanced with plans of development, and that it was better placed for the private sector to lead this, given it's an accommodation product. So we're advancing a lot of the early design, the engagement with Queensland Police Service and Brisbane 2032 about what an athlete village requires above and beyond what a normal accommodation product would need to accommodate. And so that's where the state support kicks in to make sure, one, they're built on time, two, they're built for purpose, and three, they can be retrofitted after the games as well too. So we lend lease through our partners at the RNA Showgrounds, which will be the main athlete village and host sort of, 10 to 12,000 athletes. The Royal Automobile Club of Victoria in the Gold Coast has the Royal Pines Village development underway as well too, and Walker Corporation has rights over the Maroochydore City Centre development on the Sunshine Coast. We're still working with the local industry and councils around the Rockhampton rowing athlete accommodation product as well too, and there'll be further work done and an offer made to market later in the year. But I did want to talk a little bit about Victoria Park Precinct, and not just because it's the big sexy, the stadium and the National Aquatic Centre, but it's going to give us an opportunity to do a number of things that we probably haven't done without that kind of catalyst, and it's a good excuse to actually really sort of aggregate government attention into doing things right. So this is a hard black boundary, and that's likely to be the sort of secure line during the games. But as anyone can recognise, the benefits for master planning this precinct will extend and radiate well beyond the boundaries of the park, and we do want to see that. We want to see it bleed into the city and get that true economic development. So we took that decision to actually master plan what was happening in that area, because the 2032 delivery plan had nominated the stadium, the National Aquatic Centre and the Athlete Village in there, and all of a sudden you've got close to sort of $7 to $10 billion worth of investment in one sort of 2 square kilometre radius area, not to mention Cross River Rail going through the precinct as well too. So we mobilised, we procured ARIP to help us pull that together. Geeka have their delivery partner, and now they have their principal architects, Cox and Hassel, on board, and we're actually pulling that all in together and getting a decision up to government about what major infrastructure is required. So we've got the main pieces, but that's a 63,000 seat stadium. There's a particular weekend in 2033 where, let's say it's a Saturday night in August, the Brisbane Lions have got a sold out crowd as they're charging home to the finals. It's the Ekka, and there might be pan-pack swimming trials in the National Aquatic Centre at the same time. That's upward of 220,000 people movements in a precinct over the course of a day, and they'll probably all leave the facilities at the same time. So we need to be very purposeful and deliberate around what that connecting infrastructure and people movement challenge looks like, and using a lot of the digital tools that have been developed for Cross River Rail, we'll be developing through the master plan and beyond, will start to actually help us simulate and plan for that properly. We're looking at new connections across the inner city bypass. We're looking at better permeability back into Fortitude Valley and back into Roma Street. And how do you bleed those edges so that it becomes a very accessible precinct and you can move people safely and efficiently? And this is one of my favourite slides I like to show, because it's just a very small snapshot of the complexity of what actually pulling together a deliberate plan for a precinct of that scale looks like. And this precinct's only about 20% the size of London's Olympic precinct when they held the game. So every single one of those blocks has a program of works that's going to be attached to it. So every single one of those is going to have procurement and design and engineering and delivery responsibilities stretched out a wide range of players. Even just things like site-wide precinct works in that sort of blue box around the middle of the slide. We've identified about 135 projects that are going to be needed in the precinct, both pre-games, during the games, and then in legacy mode as well too. So as you can see, the opportunities are enormous in there, and it's going to take a lot of coordination to make sure this happens in the right way and it's done responsibly. And I think that's probably where the digital tools and some of the integration comes in play. So government has made a couple of attempts at sort of pursuing digital twins at a scale that's probably been a little bit too complex for leaders and policymakers to wrap their heads around. But behind all of that our bigger agencies have been procuring their own digital solutions over time. And what we're starting to see is the technology is catching up where we can start to integrate that a lot better. And we've picked up the Cross River Rail delivery model, for example. That already captured a lot of information we're now integrating into our systems. The principal architects and the delivery partner will start adding their own nous to it. So we'll be able to start to actually pull all those pieces together so you get that whole is greater than the sum of the parts thing. So whilst we haven't necessarily made the big moves that I think maybe industry would have liked us to have been doing, it is happening and we're getting there eventually. One of the other exciting opportunities that the department's leading as well too is the Gabba Arena redevelopment, the Gabba redevelopment, which will see a new indoor entertainment centre delivered in the heart of the Brisbane CBD. So the delivery plan recognised that our Boondall facility was probably approaching the end of its usable life, and we desperately needed a new fit-for-purpose facility in the middle of the city, and that there was strong market interest to do that. So the delivery plan recognised that government was best placed to pursue a PPP option for that, with aspirations to deliver it in time for the game. So, Rob, you'll have your 17,000 seat arena for the basketball because that's the big money maker for the games. But that will also start to see an incredible opportunity for the Gabba as well too. Unfortunately, the Brisbane Cricket Ground will come down after 2032 games, but you'll see that redevelopment opportunity. So this will be a sort of 10 to 15 year project as well too. Not dissimilar to the way Queen's Wharf sort of catalysed that corner of the CBD. And probably lastly, I won't sort of labour it because TMR is in the room and it would be remiss of me to speak on their behalf, but, you know, there is an enormous program and it's probably one of the key challenges for the games. You know, we can deliver 17 upgraded and new venues to various states so that they're fit for purpose for the games, but the transport program is obviously a critical component of our success for the games. We need to be able to move an enormous amount of people up and down the coast. So the government recognised that and made recent amendments to the Olympic Games legislation to fast track that and make sure that they had an expedited approvals pathway. And there's a lot of work that's already sort of moving in that space. I'm sure these slides will be available afterwards. If they aren't, I'll make sure that they are. But for those that are interested, the number of slides that I'll just click through now, these are direct links to Geeka's website so that you can sign up to their newsletter, keep an eye on the procurement opportunities. This is the one for vendor panel for the Queensland Government sort of general, because we're doing our own procurement as well too. I'll just wait for a minute. And that last but not least, our partners in Brisbane 2032 also have their own procurement portal set up through the ICN. And that one's probably an opportunity that maybe some haven't fully appreciated yet. So whilst the government's role is to build the stage, Brisbane 2032's role is to buy the props and get all the actors in to perform on that stage, being the Olympians. Their procurement program will see probably a release of anywhere between 500 and 1,200 discrete procurement packages over the next 6 to 7 years. They've got 65 out now, and I think there's 60 that are still live. That will ramp up dramatically over the coming years, and that will be everything from, you know, large scale purchasing of water barriers, temporary fencing, grandstands, and the like, right down to the 400,000 frozen chickens they'll have to buy to feed the athlete villages every single week. It is an enormous task. It's a massive purchasing opportunity, but they'll start to release more and more of those tenders, and a lot of those will be sort of bumping in for temporary venues as well too, because they require their own design as well as their own digital overlay to start sort of mapping the operations of how all those precincts work. That's it from me.
Please welcome our second speaker, Nick Moss, Manager, Data Services, Queensland Police Service. Nick is Manager, Data Services at the Queensland Police Service, QPS, leading team responsibility for QPS-wide data management, disaster management, spatial GIS services, and data analytics and science. The team delivers corporate reference data, open data, and value-added data sets and spatial products that generate insights and directly support frontline policing. Nick is a qualified statistician with a Bachelor of Science in Statistics and Computing and a Master of Applied Statistics. He has worked across Queensland public safety agencies since 2003 and has held his current role within the QPS Policy and Insights Division since September 2017. Please welcome Nick Moss.
Thanks for that. And yeah, don't hold the stats against me. But from my team, and what I'm going to take you through is a slightly different path. We're going to talk about the spatial journey and how this is actually going to help and how we're going to align that into the Olympics and everything. One of the challenges that we've had in the past is that a lot of the technologies that are there, we haven't utilised, we haven't driven and incorporated them into our day-to-day business. And previous events like the G20 and Com Games, we didn't leave legacies to move forward again as well. So we're very keen this time to make sure we've got things ready and we've got a legacy after. So that's our approach at the moment. So what are we doing in terms of data and geospatial insights? Who thinks Queensland Police operate in the world on the left? What about, do you know what the world on the right is? That's Apollo 13, square pegs in round holes, right? We're somewhere in between, but in terms of a lot of things, we don't have this. We've got disparate data, we've got spatial information all over the place, we've got fit for purpose use cases, but it's always been an afterthought. So if you take something like a digital twin, there's plenty of things in the business case where that can actually be beneficial. But for us, using a digital twin for dignitary protection totally changes the landscape for us, but it's not one of the first things that come to mind. So we're looking at all those opportunities. We're looking at what's there. We're never going to become that, but we want to move away from the bits and pieces that we've got at the moment. So how do we do that? Nothing fancy. Data is an asset. I don't think there's anything controversial there. Spatial data we treat as data. We do not treat spatial data any differently to any of our data management. Right? Most organisations seem to have spatial different from their normal data management practices. We don't. The key service that we have built is a location validation service. Any system that spatially uses our data gets its location information from our validation service. It's what goes into our CAD systems to actually get the right coordinates. It's what goes into our disaster management system. It goes everywhere. It's Police Link for recording information. So we're saying don't use the one tool, but use our data, because if you use it in any tool and you want to look at it visually and spatially, you will get the same outcome. Right? And we incorporate that as we move forward. An online crime map, just to show you, we're not precious about any particular vendor, QGIS, Esri, precisely. We'll use whatever. And the online crime map is open source, where we actually publish the crime stats for the public to look at. Roughly 30,000, I think, unique people come to that site every month. School kids come to it to actually look at crime patterns. People buying houses look at what's there. It's a visualization of some of our open data. But again, it's whatever's fit for purpose that we try and put out there. So not one size fits all. Like I said, for us at the moment, legacy is important because we haven't done that in the past. We've done something, forgotten about how to integrate that and moving it forward. And from our end in the policing world, cost of anything is actually a considerable factor. This is not a cheap area, and the majority of our funding actually goes to the front line. So to do any of this other thing, we have to be smart, we have to be there. So fundamentally, we have three pillars. We centralise our standards governance of the spatial data. We provide visualisation and data services to applications, and then we actually have applications in itself. So depending on what the use case is, we'll bring that forward. So if you think about the Olympics work that we're working with our Olympics team, we're using the standards, the governance, the centralisation. Some visualisations they use, such as Nearmap at the moment. You know, it's just one of the many that are there. And we might have some applications specifically, and that's what we're looking at more and more in terms of the event planning. I'll just click this. So what you will see from us fundamentally, and in AWS is where our spatial data and our main platform is, but every one of the tools we use is a different product, done by a different project, implemented in a different way, but it all comes from the same data, and we present that anywhere. So we don't try and sit there and say we need one U-Butte product, we need fit for purpose products for the operations, but use that data. So just to give you an idea of the concept, when I started leading the GIS spatial group in 2018, we'd gone through a couple of mobs, and we had at one stage, I think it was 20 people, and I inherited 3. That's what was left after 2 mobs. I've now built it back up to a team of 15, but it's been hard work, and it's also making them multi-skills. So not just spatial experts, but data people. But fundamentally, in those days, each system had its own reference data, had its own environment. You know, computer-aided dispatch, anything that we produced in terms of our QPROM, our main record system. What we then started to do was say, okay, let's bring that raw data together. So it doesn't matter what it is, where it is, whether it's spatial, whether it's crime, whatever is needed, we'll bring that together. And we'll also start to introduce data as a service. So more and more we want to collaborate across platforms with our partners. We want to actually give services there. We're not saying you must be all in the one product, but how do we actually share and communicate? In doing that, we've also brought together all our reference data into one point so that people are using the same point of truth and put the standards there. And over time, we started to develop more and more products, more and more things, because it's easier to actually build on that through those point of initiatives than it is for us to actually build a huge environment. Where we keep on going is, so we've gone from data silos to services. We're now talking more and more about the capability side. How do we actually make this capabilities to support major events, disaster management, frontline operations? So, you know, like I said, the centre is that data standards. It's there, it's not spatial in its truest sense. And then we might have a number of products out there. So if you take Nearmap as an example, we have probably say about 5,000 officers who use it periodically, and they use the web browser from that company, because there's no way we could build a product like that with my small team. So they can use it, they have the data, they're totally empowered, they come to us for support and we work there. However, with the API, we can bring that into the data service and make it available to applications. So a very simple kind of model. Nearmap has been with us probably 2012, something like that. So we've been down this path for quite some time, but it just shows you our thinking, how it's slightly different. So when it comes to the 2032 games, we want to have environment for the BAU. We want to be able to manage that one event at some corp and still have things going on there and still being able to manage the security for the events. We can't do that in one system. We have to make sure that the various components and the operational leads drive that. And no questions, I'm told that's at the end, but but hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into how we're treating this event and how we work.
Please welcome our third speaker, Mark Grenfell, Spatial Services Manager, Brisbane City Council. Council's GIS Manager, supporting 10,500 staff and 1.3 million community members, focused on enhancing operational processes and enabling key events such as TC Alfred and the upcoming Olympics, Paralympics with spatial advancements. Please welcome Mark Grenfell.
Thank you. I'm going to take it a little bit differently. I'm going to show you what we've done in Brisbane City Council, how we've enabled it and with the Nearmap product that we've purchased, and then how we're rolling that out to council staff. So I guess as we kick on through, I'll run you through the products that we've got, how we're leveraging them. There we go. So again, starting, 9,500 staff, contractors on top of that, large budget that sits in there. I guess as we've brought Spatial more mainstream in council, it's being recognised as a core tool that everybody is leveraging. So we've got people using our main single mapping viewer that's run out of GeoCortex. We've got 3,500 staff in there. We've got an Esri stack that's self-service capability with 2,500 staff in there. And I guess what we've purchased through with Nearmap is the vertical imagery. So you guys are probably mostly familiar with that. We've got the impact response program. We purchased multiple AI layers, and I'll touch on those and show you how we're actually leveraging them. We've done a custom capture in late 2023 that actually gave us 2.8 centimetre ground pixel resolution on vertical imagery, and then generated a 3D mesh product off of that. So how we've then rolled that out to the 3,500 staff in council with relevant 3D tools. And then some of the Esri add-on marketplace tools that roll that through and into some of the Esri stack and that sort of thing. So I'll run you through what that actually looks like. So again, like everybody, like Nick's saying, we're using the map browser. We've got 5,000 staff in there, multiple administrators. We're consuming between about 400 and 700 gig per month. Of that, again, from 2009 to 2025, 96 historical captures, the obliques, panoramas, all the normal stuff. So if you guys are using it, you're familiar with it. I'm not going to tell you too much about that. One thing we do try and make sure of is that we roll that out, the knowledge, to the council staff. So 2024, a workshop joint between Nearmap staff and myself. We had 800 staff attending to actually go, what is the web browser? How does it work? How does that roll into our Esri stack and that sort of thing, to make sure that what we're actually buying is used by as many staff as possible and we get the most out of it. So this is our GeoCortex product. So what we do have in there is, I'd probably say 80% of council staff want the latest Nearmap product, latest capture. So that is built in there by default. Our ultra high res capture is in there as well. And then we've got it backed up with our ortho-rectified imagery as well. So again, if you're using the Nearmap imagery, it is rectified, but you'll find that there's a difference between ortho-rectified imagery and the Nearmap product. So that's why the orthos are in there as well. And plus up the top, there's a integration button that allows staff to go, if I want the historical stuff, I'll use the integration. It'll take the current viewpoint of where they are, drop them back into the Nearmap browser, and away they go. So it starts to actually integrate it into our stack, but still giving the flexibility. So that's some of the other stuff there, integrated through with the Nearmap 3D mesh. So the main map at the top there is a live link so that you can then have Google Street View, you can have Mapillary, you can have a 3D product, as well as viewing what the actual mapping itself looks like with about 780 layers that sit on top of the imagery. And then basically making sure that they're linked windows. So as you pan the map, in that case, 3D model actually moves back and forth. So again, when you're using a multi-window browser session, you have them on different screens, starts to give the ability for people to understand in council what is there, what's the overlays with the different information, and what does it look like in the real world. Again, as Nick's saying, it saves those trips out into the field, makes us more efficient. Probably the other one then is we've rolled out a enterprise portal environment, and we've got 2,500 staff in there doing their own self-service mapping. So the first one was a curated 780 layers. We've got tens of thousands of layers that are branch owned, if I call it that. So customers and council will go, well, I care about the mozzie breeding sites. And in the past, they had an Excel spreadsheet. They've converted that into a spatial layer. They then go, well, I now put that in and I can put that on top of Nearmap imagery or whatever else they need and start to build their own specific solution for what they want. Similarly with ArcGIS Pro and that sort of thing on the more analysis side of it. The AI layers, so we buy multiple AI layers for different things. We'll touch on the building footprints in a tick, but swimming pools for public safety, where are the pools, which ones have got compliance done on them, vegetation, what's that changing like, how are we planting the street trees, so there's 16,000 street trees planted per year. Are we making much of a dent into where we need to get to? Yeah, so that's some of the stuff there with those. We use the building footprints into our public-facing Floodwise and Flood Information Online solution, and that actually gives members of the public the ability to understand what a building is at with its habitable floor level and what the different flood levels are that sit around that. And yeah, you can go and print that out and understand what that means to you. And the flip side of that, internally during emergency events, we use an Esri product that we've built ourselves as a dashboard that takes live flood information, uses the building footprints to then go, how many properties have got a habitable floor level impact, how many of those buildings are impacted, how many properties are impacted. And then we can update that through different flood events live multiple times as we actually generate it. So again, we purchase the building footprints once a year so that we've got that. The building height information comes with it, and then we extract that sort of intelligence from it. This one is then flowing into the 3D side of it. So as I said, we purchased the 2.8 centimetre mesh product. So that covers all probably 950 square kilometres of Brisbane City. And that is at the moment a one-off product to go, how much is this used in council? How much is it saving? Therefore, what does it look like for reinvestment? And again, in 2025, we rolled that out as a workshop and had 1,000 staff attending, which then starts to give us these sort of tools available to all council staff. So what is a building setback height? How high is it? What is the face of a building? What sort of area is it? Looking at the height profiles of houses and that sort of thing to go from a flood event, what does that building look like? How far above it? And that sort of thing. I thought I'd take you into Mount Cootha Quarry, and this was a capture done in August last year. And then in September, October, the next line of works was done to extract the material. So what we're then used to seeing after that is this sort of an image that was captured in November. So you can see the spoil and that sort of thing there, and they're starting to mine that out. And that's what most council staff have been used to in the past. By having the 3D model, now what they can start to do is actually go, this is just one example, but seeing what the actual ground surface looks like. This was obviously a capture that was done in 2023, but it then gives a tool in there to actually start to go, not only can I visually see it, but I can then start to measure it and interact with it. So in a second, I'll draw a height profile from the bottom to the top. And then that will actually allow me to see what the height is. And in this particular case, we've then gone and used previous LiDAR as well. And you can then start to see what that change over time has been. And you'll see a magenta line and the orange line. And then again, this is, I think what's a little bit different with Brisbane is that this has then been rolled out to up to 9,500 staff. So this is the sort of capability that's going to flow into lots of different facets of our business and making sure that the council staff know how to use it and what we can do with it. So summarising up, yeah, basically spatial platform used across lots of different parts of council. And again, starting to go into the games readiness with what is our street tree locations? Where do we need to get these walkable boulevards? Road closure processes, 3D enablement for public venues. So there's different things coming out with One Plan and other vendors who are doing 3D captures of the Olympic venues. yeah, and then starting to go, what's the next step? So how do we get the BIM and the Gaussian splats and that sort of thing and supplement the mesh models? How do we get more than just the visual intelligence out of what we've got? How do we actually start to extract knowledge from the products, including Nearmap? And that's probably me done.
Welcoming our fourth speaker, Mathilde Booth, Associate Sustaining Capital at Oricon. Mathilde is an associate in Oricon's Sustaining Capital team, bringing together strong expertise in digital tools, engineering excellence, and information management across major infrastructure projects. With a background in structural engineering, Mathilde applies deep technical insight to program and project delivery in complex environments. Mathilde has led digital twin implementations and provided information management advisory services on projects including North East Link, Inland Rail, and Sydney Metro. A certified practicing project director, Mathilde excels in portfolio, program, and project management with a passion for analysing operation challenges and delivering targeted, innovative technology solutions. Please welcome Mathilde Booth.
Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about today is really the 2032 and beyond. So we've heard from the previous speaker all the great things that they're doing in terms of planning and, building and gearing up for the Olympics. And I'm going to focus on what we can do with the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure left after 2032. So what we've seen is, as I mentioned, data and geospatial intelligence can really be used for planning. Tim mentioned that there's a lot of coordination. That's 9% of the portfolio is the game, but then we have TMR, we have hospitals, we have schools, we have also just normal maintenance, the infrastructure. So that's where geospatial can help coordinate all that, especially in tight precinct or urban areas. In delivery also, I'm pretty sure we're going to start hearing more and more from contractors in the near future, but as they start delivering the venue, they will show how they use, broader digital and data and geospatial to better deliver and do, for example, 4D staging, of the construction, again, noting the constraint into tight precincts. But what I'm going to focus on is the legacy. So what can we use? What can we leave as a digital legacy beyond the games, and what that can look like for the Queensland infrastructure? So you've heard a lot already about the concept of digital twin. So I'm not going to read, but here's the definition on the screen. It's actually regulated by an ISO standard for digital twin concept and terminology. So ISO 30173, if you're really keen for a really exciting lecture, at night, that would be, go read through it. What I think is really important to understand is that we need three elements. We need a functional entity. So it could be like a venue, it could be a road, it could be a piece of utility, a pipe in the ground. We need a digital representation. So basically, if it's a pipe on the ground, we need a line in a CAD drawing or, a 3D visualization of that. If it's a venue, like 3D building. And then we need some sort of data connection between the two. So as Mark just mentioned, we need that connection where we can see the history of it. So it doesn't mean that the data is necessarily live, that you see exactly what's happening at this very minute, but there's some sort of history and refresh to it, even if it's an annual, a 5-yearly refresh, to try to understand how the asset is basically performing over time and then drive better decision making. Because we will have data, in 2032 when the venue are built, but then in 2035, it will look a little bit different. And by 2040, if we haven't updated what it looks like, are we really making the best decision, for it? So that's where a digital twin can help, and it could look like. So these are actually a digital twin that is already done by Transport New South Wales, down, of course, in New South Wales. But what they have is basically you can integrate all the 3D model onto a map layer and try to understand for planning what it will look like. So things like, for example, if we have all the venues together, for new development, we can understand how it works together. We can also understand what the area will look like in terms of density, whether we need new social infrastructure. If suddenly you're building, like on this one, I don't know, a dozen of tower, you probably need a school for, and a hospital close up nearby to help all those people living into it. So that's at the moment, there's a big push in Queensland to aggregate all this data, but I think that with the Olympic, it gives, the amount of data that's going to be created in a very short time frame is really going to help faster accelerate that digital by default sort of mindset and really help bring all this data together. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to build on it, and it's going to give a really strong backbone to it. So a lot of words, but you will get given the slides so you can refer onto it. But a few things that can give a legacy. The first one is a connected Southeast Queensland. So it's having really this infrastructure backbone that we can rely on, and from a digital perspective for today and tomorrow community needs. So today the community, for example, next to Victoria Park, they will be interested in what will be the disruption during construction and during the games. But the community that will come and start living into those precincts in 2032, late in the year 2033, they don't care about the construction because it's done and, they can just enjoy. So we need to make sure that we cater for those two types of community because their need and their use cases would be very different. What I call economic sustainability, and it's what I do a lot of in sustaining capital, it's really trying to find that balance between new investment, new infrastructure that everybody is super excited about, but also maintaining what we have. And, having a strong geospatial base that we can see, we can coordinate and, make sure that, well, if there's a new development, but we have to redo the road to lead next to it, how can we do that in a smart way that we don't, for example, just rebuild the road before all the truck comes into it and damage it again for the new development, having all those smart linkage. Connected precinct, it's linked to the accessibility and inclusive, is how do we make sure that all the precincts that we are developing, like Victoria Park, like maybe the GABA, how do we make sure that we can enable people, places and movements, that people can navigate through it easily, can have good public transport connection, can walk from one point to another safely, and can really create this better livability for Brisbane. And it's linked to the accessibility and inclusivity. Cross River Rail did already an amazing, digital twin of Cross River Rail and through the experience that you can access in the city. But one of the key things that they've done, for example, is that they invited people in wheelchairs, so wheelchair users, to actually navigate through the station at their height. And it means that they were able to figure out that, well, the tap in, tap on, for the go-kart was actually a little bit too high for a wheelchair user because, it was more than it was meant for people that are able-bodied that can walk through. And all those little things were able to be picked up at design stage and then lead to a better design, a better construction, more accessible. So we can keep continuing and really bring that, instead of being this new innovative thing that could become BAU after the game, that can really be something that we all do. And then sustainability is another point where if we have a strong already understanding of what's the current infrastructure and we can start doing some simulation on top, then that's where we can have a look at how we can incorporate more sustainability, whether it's local material, whether it's different staging to specify different concept, whether it's circular economy, if for example, you remove one of the road on that side and then another road needs some filling. Can you actually, stage it in a way that makes sense to really achieve, the reduction target of 75% by 2035? So I think the key point of my presentation is trying to say that the game is the catalyst to really drive this digital point, but there's a lot more that the game will enable for the future and for, in terms of digital legacy for Queensland. So thank you.
I'd now like to welcome our final speaker, Fraser Blom, Solutions Engineer, Nearmap. Fraser is a Solutions Engineer at Nearmap with deep geospatial expertise, currently completing his Masters in GIS to further advance his technical capabilities in location intelligence. Fraser is passionate about helping organisations discover how aerial imagery, mapping, and spatial data can transform their operations and workflows to achieve optimised and efficient outcomes. Leveraging his established geospatial knowledge, He shows how emerging technologies like AI and automation are reshaping the way teams work with geographic information, and is focused on developing solutions that make location-based insights more accessible and actionable for clients across various industries. Please welcome Fraser Blom.
I've taken a different approach again. I wanted to go on a bit of a journey with everyone, starting with what Rob mentioned at the start, our work exploring high resolution, and you've heard a couple of mentions about impact response. That's the vessel we're using to explore high res. Going from that into how we use our post-catastrophe knowledge and the spatial data from that to better pre-plan for weather events and catastrophes in the future. And then finally, kind of tacking on from Matilda's point about the legacy of the games, I guess the best thing about being last is everyone else has kind of introduced everything I'm already talking about, so I don't have to do a lot of preamble. So first of all, what is impact response? This is our natural disaster capture program. It's basically a set budget of survey time that we set aside every year, accounting for natural disasters that are going to happen. And we aim to go out there and fly it as soon as we possibly can to try and get some ground truth about what goes on the ground. I don't know, people that work in flood modeling and that sort of stuff, we do a lot of modeling, but the models are just algorithmic. Water does what water wants to do. And so it's really beneficial to be able to get out there and see where the actual high water marks are, what houses were actually affected. Same thing with bushfire, hail, all that sort of stuff. So this is kind of our impact response timeline. We sort of say it started in 2011 when we captured the big Brisbane floods, but it really began in earnest in 2022 after the Southeast Queensland floods. And so we sort of had maybe 6 events in the 11 years before 2022, and then there's 5 major events since then. So we're really trying to capture pretty much every major weather event that happens now. It doesn't have to be a statewide disaster. It can be like the hailstorms we just had in November in Wynnum and Bribie Island and that sort of thing, or even the bushfires that just happened down in Victoria. We're capturing all that sort of stuff. So what does this have to do with high res? So I'll go back to Mark's presentation about in 2023, we did a custom capture, which was a great opportunity for us to test the capability of our latest camera. We were mentioning Hyper Camera 3. So that camera is our latest generation of in-house camera. And it basically allows us to get from something like a 7.5 centimeter resolution down to a 3 centimeter resolution, which you can see the difference in detail. Those are both aerial images, but just the difference in clarity you get when you get down to that sort of resolution. We then took that idea and we kind of really wanted to push the boundaries. We have a lot of customers in the insurance space, and that's actually where my background is. They were asking what kind of detail we could pick up from things like hailstorms and wind events. And so November last year was the perfect opportunity to test that capability. And we went out and we flew and we got a bunch of surveys ranging from 1.5 centimeters up to 2 centimeters GSD, or ground sampling distance. And the really important thing with that is you can kind of see the image from Wynnum on the left there. That's a 2 centimeter capture, and you can start to see individual like cracks in solar panels, individual missing tiles. And then if we go to the one on the right, which is Bribie Island, if we were to zoom in, you can actually go into the guy's kitchen and see his cooktop underneath his roof that's just been removed. So the amount of detail you can get from a 1.5 centimeter or 2 centimeter capture is just like leagues ahead of what you get from a standard 7.5 centimeter capture. And we take all this great data, and I guess we're really lucky if we're Brisbane locals because we have all these great flood maps. We have all this great imagery. We kind of know that Brisbane floods a lot. It's the tagline there is a river with a city problem. It's a really quite famous historical book about the city of Brisbane and its tumultuous history with water. You can see there Suncorp Stadium masquerading as a pool. And I think one of the great things about spatial data and data in general is it's a really strong communication tool. But even with all this data, you still see people walking into floodwaters and taking selfies when any reasonable person would not do that, at least in my opinion. And I think what we're trying to do is really bridge the gap between people that know the risk and people then understanding the risk. So we've mentioned digital twins, we've mentioned flood mapping, we've mentioned disaster response. I've created a little, very lightweight, one level of detail digital twin here using our AI building footprints that Mark mentioned. We've extruded them up using our digital surface model so you can get the heights of those features, and then texturize the base with our base map as well as our digital terrain model to give us the actual elevation. Then these blue polygons that keep popping up, these are historic flood event gauge heights. So we went and got them and put them over the top and extruded them up. And now when you look at that, you can kind of see like, oh, well, what does this actually mean? It's like, it's all good to see a polygon on a 2D map and look at a house and go, okay, cool, that house floods. But what does that actually mean? You build that up, the water level goes up, the water's at the roof, kind of speaks a bit differently, makes it hit a little bit harder. You can see Milton Road going underwater. Imagine there's 52,000 people in Suncorp Stadium, and now we've got water over Coronation Drive and Milton Road. How do we get 50,000 people out of that stadium and where they need to go? But also we got houses flooding up in the corner there. How do we make sure the residents are also safe? So I think when you start visualizing stuff like this, it can help tell your story and it can help get it across a bit better than just looking at the data. Like Nick said, spatial data is data, but data is a tool for communication and a tool for analysis. And so how do we push the boundaries, taking it out of spreadsheets, out of 2D stuff, and really make this like a compelling story that people want to look at and people are interested in looking at, rather than just going, oh, well, there's a blue line around my house. What does that mean? I'm going to buy it anyway, and then complaining when it floods next year. And then finally, the legacy question. I'm really glad that Mathilde spoke heavily on this because it's something I'm super passionate about as well. We always hear about mostly the infrastructure stuff. If we build a swimming pool now, we get to keep swimming in that pool for however long. That's what everyone talks about with the Sydney Games. But it's also the digital infrastructure. It's like all the tools we build today and all the insights we build today, all the software, all of those things, and all the infrastructure as well. We should be able to use that into the future. This really is a catalyst. It's something that helps us propel ourselves forward. Sometimes we need a push to really make some change, and hopefully this is the kind of thing that does that. There's a big influence and emphasis on this resilient concept, and everyone thinks that's just about like mitigating damage, but part of resilience is also how you respond to events, how you react to them, how quickly you can recover from these sorts of things. And I think leveraging spatial data can make us more aware, can make us react better. And so there's a big question about how can we use this to be prepared for the next Brisbane flood or the next Sunshine Coast flood? I guess, yeah, we are lucky. Brisbane's quite adapted, but you go to a council just outside of Brisbane, they might not have the same insights and the same data. How do we make this standard across the board for all these places? Because the weather doesn't care. It'll hit anyone whenever it wants to. And then finally, just how do we push what's possible with location intelligence? So we're talking about this digital twin and these site inspections and that sort of stuff. And that particular model, once the code was written, takes about 2 seconds to run the building footprints, another 2 seconds to actually extrude them up, and then another couple of seconds to put the flood model on top of it. So you've taken a process that might take you weeks to model by hand and effectively turn it into an automated process that can take you a couple of minutes. And it's not unique to just Brisbane. I could draw a polygon over Sunshine Coast and do the same thing and have a digital twin of the Sunshine Coast with flood polygons in a couple of seconds as well. I could go down to Sydney and do the same thing. That data and that tool is completely reusable wherever I want it to be.
Thank you everyone for your time today. We hope today's session was very insightful, action-packed, and you're able to take away with some valuable information on how you can impact your organization and be part of the built environment in Queensland. But before we finally conclude, I'd really like to say a big thank you to our guest speakers, Mathilde, Timothy, Mark, Nicholas, and of course, Nearmap's own Fraser. And thank you everyone in the room today and who's joining us online. We're excited about what's ahead and how we can continue to support you in this once-in-a-generation environment of the 2032 Games with better coverage, better insights, and more powerful data to help everyday decisions be made. Thank you once again for your time today, and please feel free to reach out if you'd like any more information or to contact the teams. Appreciate it again. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today, so please join me once again in thanking Rob Malkin, Timothy Hortz, Mark Grenfell, Nick Moss, Mathilde Booth, and Fraser Blom for their time and input. I'd also like to thank Engineers Australia's industry partner, Nearmap, for their support. As always, if you could please take a couple of minutes to complete a short feedback form, which is linked in the description box below, to help us improve and plan for future sessions. Please also scan the QR code on the screen to view and register for our upcoming events. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Industry Partners event. Thank you and good afternoon.